we can just jump in. Feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions. But my portion of this should be fairly simple, so hopefully not too hard for anyone to understand. We're going to be talking about decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what these organizations are, and then pass it on to Yeb and Jackie to dive into more of the significant legal questions that arise from this type of entity. Next slide. So if you're like me and not familiar with all of the new developments in Web3, you're probably asking, what is a DAO? Next slide, please. So first, a DAO is decentralized. So in contrast with your typical corporate pyramid, DAOs are managed by all of their members. Generally, there's no centralized location, no centralized person or persons managing the organization. It's just a web of co-owners, all contributing to the direction and operation of the organization. And next, DAOs are called autonomous. This word is imperfect for describing these organizations because it gives the impression that machines are controlling the organization, when in fact, DAOs are extremely human-centric. Autonomous best describes the smart contracts that underlie these organizations. So a smart contract is essentially an algorithm. Members insert an input, the algorithm takes some action as an output. So DAOs are built on these smart contracts, and they allow the organization to take action based on member voting. And finally, organization. DAOs bring people together, often from all over the world, in order to cooperate on a common set of goals. So we know a DAO is a decentralized organization built on smart contracts. What does that look like in practice? How do these organizations actually operate? Currently, there's a lot of flexibility for founders to decide how the organization will operate. Because of this flexibility, you can find a wide range of DAOs that look extremely different from one another. We're going to look into a couple of important areas where we might see some variation amongst DAOs. And those areas are going to be tokenization and then voting and governance. So diving into tokenization, you can think of a token in some respects like the physical cash that's falling out of use today. Like take a $100 bill, for example. There are a variety of ways you can come to possess a $100 bill. You can provide services and receive it as compensation. You could trade in a paper check to receive it. And once you have that $100 bill, it represents a certain value that you possess. And you can take that bill and exchange it for a good or service, hold on to it as a representation of your wealth. Importantly, a $100 bill can operate in this manner because we agree that it represents a certain value. So that small slip of green paper is not actually composed of $100 worth of resources, but as a society, we agree to prescribe it that value. And tokens are similarly representing agreed on value. So, sorry, my computer went a little wonky on me.
I have a question.
So there's a couple of models for how these tokens are both given value and how members can receive these tokens. So one would be a share-based model. For this type of model, tokens are distributed upon financial contribution. So for these DAOs, you're often able to transfer the tokens amongst one another. There's also a merit-based model where tokens are distributed upon performing certain activities. Members can contribute time, expertise, ideas, and earn tokens. And in this model, tokens are generally non-transferable. So once you have these tokens, they can represent different things. They can be a right to receive financial dividends, but they can also be tied to voting rights. DAOs are democratic organizations at their core, and no action can be taken without a vote. And there are two primary models for distributing voting rights in DAOs. There's share-based voting, and this is what we're used to seeing in the typical corporate structure. Each member gets a vote proportional to the number of tokens they possess. So in an organization that uses share-based tokenization, this gives the person with the greatest financial stake in the organization the most influence. Whereas if the organization was using merit-based tokenization, this would give the person who is most active in the organization the most influence. Alternatively, DAOs can operate on a one member, one vote model, which is similar to what we see in cooperatives. So in that instance, every member of the DAO receives one equally weighted vote. And then finally, I'm going to touch on a couple of key features that are present in nearly every DAO. And first is transparency. Because DAOs operate via smart contracts, every action taken is recorded in the blockchain. And this means that anyone can reference the blockchain to verify that the action was properly taken. And this visibility is predicted to allow for better corporate governance under a fully democratic model. And then additionally, I've already touched on DAOs being human-centric. DAOs are member managed. People submit proposals, the members vote, and that determines the direction of the organization. And now that we have a basic understanding of what DAOs are and how they might operate, I'm going to pass it on to Yev and Jackie to dive into those legal ramifications of operating a DAO.